Says I'm live, so looks like we're ready to go. Good morning, everyone. It's a nice Sunday morning, and we're going to do a probably pretty lengthy talk on plant ferts. Now, before we get started on that, one disclaimer I do want to say is that I'm not going to be describing what each plant fert does or how to spot deficiencies, that kind of deal. There are other hobbyists out there who are much more practiced at that than I am. For that, I would refer you over to Bentley Pascal. He has a great video going into all of the macro and micronutrients and how you can spot for some deficiencies. Hopefully you guys can hear me. But and I also believe Green Aqua has a very good video out there on plant deficiencies and how to spot them and dealing with them. But what I am going to talk about for the most part of the day is the different fertilizers and things that I use, my thoughts on them, kind of a review, but I will go into a little detail on what these will help with in some cases. So while I get all that set up, I'm going to try and push this light over here so you all can see the terrarium and geranium that my girlfriend and myself competed against last week. This is week 2, so I think a lot has changed in both, but I want to give you all a second to take a good look at them and see what you think. Of course, this is only week 2, so we got probably 2 more weeks that I'll be displaying these, and then we'll have to figure something else out to put behind me. Not sure what that's going to be. But anyway, let me get this light set up. You all can try and see these a little bit better. And I'm going to get the fertilizer set up so that we can talk about it. All right. Well, nothing too crazy in either of those currently, but my seedlings are coming in quite well. So I'm pretty happy with how mine's doing. I believe my girlfriend is pretty happy with how hers is doing. Everything is slowly coming in. And she actually has kept the dwarf baby tears alive for the first 2 weeks, which is pretty impressive because usually they need CO2. So we'll see how it keeps going. But I'm excited to see where this goes. All right, but now we're going to continue on to fertilizers. So again, these, I'm not going to what you're looking for. You can find pictures, other videos, other more expert hobbyists that can talk all of that, explain that better than I can. But what I'm going to be going through is kind of my arsenal of what I currently have. There are some other things that I might recommend as well, but pros and cons of each, and then a little bit of talking about. So it's a lot to unpack, but we're going to just start working through it. So the first one I'm going to go with is a name I've used quite frequently here, Aquarium Co-op's Easy Green. This is an all-in-one fertilizer. They come in all kinds of different companies. Nylock G makes one. I believe Tropica makes one. I mean, the list goes on and on. Dustin's Fish Tanks makes them. There's plenty of options, but this is the one that I have been using for a while now. It's very easy to use. That's the nice part. It says 1 pump per 10 gallons or 1 milliliter per 10 gallons. Dose once a week for low or easy care plants, twice a week for medium to high care But if you're really getting towards high care, you might want to look into some other options. But overall, it has a good, breakdown of all of the macro and micronutrients in here. Water is different, but one thing that I have noticed with this is that I do have to add a little bit of phosphate to help compensate with my tap water and using this regularly. With that said, though, I use this on pretty much, I'll explain more of that in a second, but I pretty much use this on all of my easy care tanks, which are basically the shrimp tanks that I'm not trying to grow things too quickly, but I do want to get a little bit of growth and a few extra plants that I might be able to sell down the road. So this works out pretty well for me. It is shrimp and snail safe. I can guarantee that. I do notice that with this guy, I will eventually have to do a water change. The nitrates just slowly start to creep up. Now, that's probably because there's some deficiency in my water. So you may have better success with that. So with that said, an all-in-one fertilizer is a great option for a beginner, someone who's just dipping their feet in. Something like this makes it very easy for you, one pump. However, that pump doesn't guarantee it's 1 milliliter, and I have a bit of an issue with that as of late. I'm noticing that sometimes especially as it starts to get lower, I'm not necessarily getting a milliliter, especially if it got a bubble or something in there, then you may not get the entire dosage. So I'm still using the pump just out of convenience, and I'm not being as specific. Again, these are on my easy care tank. So if you have an easy care tank, I think it works really well. However, you may want to search around for different options. So say you get the Aquarium Co-op's Easy Green, #free plug. It may not work with your water. There may be other options like the Nylachi, like the Tropica all-in-one. So you may have to try a few different all-in-ones, but it is a very simple, easy option for the everyday aquarist who doesn't really want to be dosing all these different fertilizers, needs something cheap, just easy to use. This is probably a good starting option, and for a lot of you, probably a good finishing option. So that's my thoughts on all-in-ones. Very good overall for beginners, and in most cases, it's pretty good unless you're doing CO2, highlighting, things like that. But we'll talk about what you do for that situation here in a second. So moving along, again, we'll continue on with Aquarium Co-op. This is their Easy Iron. Same concept, 1 pump per 10 gallons. What I have to say is be very careful with this. I would honestly underdose it because there is a chance you have iron in your water unless you're using RO water and you know what you're doing. But if you know that, you're probably not here to listen to me talk because you know more than I do, I bet. Anyway, it is a good product, but I do find that I can't really put this in my water a lot. Like 1 pump is too much for even my 40-gallon. I have to just do a few drops. That's because I get thread algae very easily, and I hate getting thread algae, so I'm very strict on how much iron I put in there. I'd rather go under than go over. I'm not too concerned about the reds popping in the tanks that I'm using this in. There just aren't a lot of them. But with that said, the iron is good to help bring out the reds in red plants, pink plants. If you have a nice pink flamingo, you might need some extra iron. But I would, those are the real options. Otherwise, I don't really see anyone really needing this to pick up. I guess it works, but I don't find a lot of cases where a large container like this will probably last me a few years, if not more. It'll probably not work or expire by the time that I even get close to running through it. But if you're running CO2 in a high-tech tank and you really want those reds to pop, you may want to grab some Easy Iron. All right, continuing on, we're going to go to Bloom and Grow's potassium. This is actually a new one. I just got this the other day. So I've just started working with this. This is supposed, again, this is a macronutrient, if you don't know, but this is supposed to help with stem and root growth and yellowing, especially on those lower leaves. Now, what I like about this is it's nitrate and phosphate free. So let me try and turn that light a little bit. I don't know if you can see that or not, but it is nitrate and phosphate free, which is good because you don't want to be adding more. I like it has its own macro or micronutrient that you're dosing. That's kind of helpful in my eyes. So potassium being a macronutrient, I have a nice big bottle of it. These are mostly going for my geraniums and terrariums right now, wabikusas, those types of things. I don't really find it necessary to put in a lot of my aquariums right now. I start adding it in because as of right now, I don't think it's too necessary. But I got this because I wanted to try it out. All right, moving on. So this is Leaf Zone by API. So this is, again, a potassium, but this is also an iron. So that's one thing that I'm not super thrilled about in this product is that they throw the iron in there. So if you really need potassium for whatever reason in your water, using this could also lead to an algae bloom, something like thread algae or blackbeard algae you could get because of that extra iron. I see what they're getting with, nutrient uptake. The iron's supposed to help with that, but I would personally do them separately because I think mixing them together, but it may work for a very low tech tank. Excuse me. With a decent amount of fish poop and adding some, which we'll talk about in a second. All right, so yeah, this I use every once in a while, but again, this is mostly for geraniums. I think someone actually gave this to me for free, and I just kind of had it around just in case, or if I run out of some kind of fertilizer. It works in a pinch, but definitely towards the bottom of my usage list. All right, moving on. Flourish. So this is probably the most common line that you're going to see. They come in all different shapes and sizes. I have 3 of them here. They also have trace. I think they have an iron one. I mean, they've got all the macro micronutrients you need. So the plus side to this is it's specific. It's just nitrogen. Actually, this one looks like it has potassium in there as well. So not thrilled about that. I would probably keep them separate just because if I'm dosing both of these, I don't want too much potassium in my water. But yeah, each of them all have like a very, very small amount of potassium. So, user beware, sorry, that there is potassium in here. So that's something to consider if you plan on trying to add more of this. You may be having excess of potassium. But I'm doing this in my geraniums. I'm going to see how the results go over the next few weeks. And then I will hopefully remember to bring that information back to you all. If not, hopefully someone can remind me. But the nice part about this is it is basically nitrogen mostly. So you want to add some nitrogen or you're starting to cycle a tank, something like that. This is very helpful for adding purely nitrogen. So the nice part about the Flourish line is that they are specialized in what they say on the label is pretty much what you get. Again, I wish they would take out the potassium so that I could just add it personally. But that's because I'm very anal about micromanaging what goes into my tanks. But that aside, I think that having the variety is very helpful, especially if you're just adding a little bit to try and compensate for a deficiency. Now, I know that will lead to other deficiency problems, but one deficiency, if you ask me, can be a lot worse than another. What I mean by that is that a boron deficiency is a lot worse than, say, a nitrogen deficiency in my eyes, or in some cases having an excess of one thing that you need to add other fertilizers to get rid of, say too much iron in your water, and you're like, oh, I need to get rid of it, but you can't do water changes to solve that. So your options are RO, or you try and compensate it by adding fertilizers. So I think that's where Flourish can do a very good job of offering that option to add some fertilizers of whatever you're deficient in, or especially if you have an excess of a nutrient that's causing an algal problem. Having these various options is helpful. All right, but moving on, now we have Flourish Phosphorus. Again, this is another macronutrient. This is one that I have to use pretty regularly with my water because there's not a lot in it, and so I need to add some to my tanks to help get everything moving and help keep my nitrogen down, because I tend to slowly creep up in nitrogen, and I strongly believe that it has to do with a lack of phosphorus in the water. However, an excess of phosphorus, again, like almost everything, can lead to an algal bloom. This one, again, will lead to thread algae problems if you have an excess amount of it. So if you're going to go this route, you may want to consider getting some various tests. If you're wanting to go hardcore and deal with the algae problems as they come, then no test kits are necessary, but you may want to consider doing a phosphate test kit and an iron test kit if you're going to go this route. They're not too expensive, and phosphate especially is pretty readily available because of the saltwater world. Now, one comment I can say about phosphorus is that it can be taken up into stem plants and held there for a very long time. So adding more frequently isn't exactly necessary. The stem plants will take up this phosphorus and then store it until it's necessary for them to use. Now, if you can accelerate that process, then you can dose it regularly. But in a lot of cases, you won't be needing to add a lot of this, say as much as this. So in a lot of my tanks, I'm using this more regularly, and then maybe once or every 2 weeks, I will add some more phosphorus in there. But that's really just dialing your tank in. The last Flourish product I got is Excel. This, despite what they label it as, saying it's bioavailable carbon for the planted aquarium, it's an algicide. Basically, all it does is help kill algae. I use this frequently to attack blackbeard algae. I will take a little syringe and just kind of suck it up and then squirt it directly where I see the blackbeard algae issues. But it will work with lots of other algae. I wouldn't try it with algae on the glass, but it will definitely work with blackbeard. It can help with thread. So it does say it's bioavailable carbon, and that is true. There is carbon in here that plants can uptake, but it's not easy and it's not ideal. So, of course, CO2 is going to be your best option. This option could work for a short period of time or for some time, and with good oxygen flow or airflow with a bubbler or something. This might be an option in the case of a gerarium or a very low-tech tank, Wallstad tank, something like that. This might be an option for a while. I don't honestly believe this is a permanent option. Personally, I use it as an algicide, and then just for my gerariums for that carbon aspect. But outside of that, I wouldn't do this. But great algicide. We will talk in another video some ways to attack algicide or algae in the planted aquarium, or just in any aquarium really. And I do have some previous videos on that topic that are a little rough, so I want to make a new one that's a little more polished. But if you guys go back through my channel, you can see some videos of where I've done some other options, or even using Flourish XL to get rid of algae, mostly blackbeard algae. So you can check that out. All right, so moving on. Easy root tabs. Now, I haven't started using these yet, but that is because the tank I'm planning on putting them in is currently getting medicated, so I want to wait until the medication's done, and then I'll put these in. I just don't want to stress them out too much. Now, root tabs, they come in two forms. One's usually a pill, one's usually like a brick or a block. Both forms work. One's a little faster releasing, one's a little slower. The pill form seems to be the more popular form, but I do believe Flourish actually makes a block form that's a little bit clunkier. Now, these are, it's basically a fine amount of mineralized topsoil that is put into a capsule and then shoved in the ground, and then the capsule dissolves and the roots can go feed on the nutrients below. So this is very important for heavy root feeders. Your Amazon swords, your crypts, your carpeting plants, your lilies. All of those are very heavy root feeders, and so these root tabs are especially important. If you have a big Amazon sword, you can shove one of these right underneath it, and it's going to love it. It's going to help it grow a lot, and it'll help look nice and pretty in all the colors you want. So, again, I haven't used these yet personally. I will let you all know how that goes, but the concept is pretty similar, the same. You just shove it into the bottom of your tank basically until you can feel the glass, and that's where you leave it. You don't want it floating up. You want it stuck down as far as possible, because when that capsule does dissolve, it will release that soil, and you don't want those nutrients leaching out into the water, because you can get an ammonia spike and then algal bloom and fish dying, and it's just a horrible time. So make sure these are all the way down at the bottom. But I mean, you still have a little bit of time. Don't think you have to rush with these. Maybe 15 minutes. I wouldn't try and mess around with it much longer than that, but I would do no more than 15. But it's not like it's going to dissolve in the first minute or two that you're messing with it. You got a little bit of time, so you don't have to worry about that. So these are, so basically you plant these every 5 to 6 inches in a grid-like pattern wherever is needed. And you'll replace them every 3 to 4 months, but that really is dependent on how much plants you have or how heavy those root feeders are. Again, if you have swords or lilies, you'll probably replace them every 1 to 2 months once they start getting pretty decently sized. But if you're just doing a nice carpet or something, yeah, you'd probably be okay with 3 months. But that, again, is variable. So this, I think, will be a good option for me for my mainly foreground plants, or what is almost an iwagumi tank, but I think that they're mostly root feeders, so I'm going to be putting them in there. So I would say we're going to pause real quick and talk about the best option for a low-tech tank. If I had to recommend a few products for a low-tech, even to a medium-tech tank, or for the beginner hobbyist, or someone that's just getting into planted tanks, this is the route I would take, and I think you could be very happy. Now, what you have to understand is the difference between stem plants versus rooted plants, because stem plants and epiphyte plants feed mostly in the water column, whereas heavy root feeders like crypts and swords feed mostly in the roots. They can get some nutrients from the water column, but it's not ideal, and they won't grow as fast that way. So here is my basic suggestion for the new aquarist or new planted aquarium hobbyist. First off, is Aquarium Co-op's Easy Green, or any all-in-one fertilizer. This is going to be your lifeblood. Having one of these is going to make it very easy for you to be successful, I believe. Following the instructions is very simple. You don't have to do all these different fertilizers like that. I can't even hold up all the individual ones I have. So this is your big coverage. So this will work very well for easy to medium care plants. If you don't know what that is, I suggest you look up the plant you're interested in and find it out, because there's a lot of information out there from plenty of good websites that can tell you if it's an easy, medium care, etc. So this would be, and with that, everyone's level's different. Some people may be able to grow dwarf baby tears like a champion, but fail horribly at Java moss. I can't say why. It just, some people are good like that or bad like that. You know, we all have our individual skill set. So, but for overall, I think for most people's skill set, this is going to be your answer. It's an all-in-one fertilizer. It makes life simple. But again, you may want to occasionally check for your nitrates just to make sure they're not getting too high, and you need to do a water change. Now, if you start seeing algae problems, you may need to look into either a few extra bottles, or maybe a different all-in-one is probably a better option. Go look for something else. Now, if you are having a lot of root feeders, easy root tabs, or plenty of the other root tabs that lots of companies have. I forgot to mention this earlier, but do not go get Osmocote root tabs from other places. They may work for some people, but for those who it does not work for, the situation where I described an algal bloom and death and ammonia spikes and unhappiness, that's the case with those Osmocotes. It may only be 3% of the time or less, but do you really want to take that risk? Personally, I would spend more money and just get one from a professional place that I can guarantee the product is good and high quality. So again, haven't tried the root tabs, but I wouldn't be surprised that they're high quality. Aquarium Co-op just does high quality stuff. So I'm going to give these a shot, but there's plenty of other root tabs out there. ADA, Tropica, Flourish, basically any company, if they make a plant fertilizer, they probably have a root tab. So that's a very good option if you have lots of heavy root feeders or are doing a lot of carpeting plants. I would stock up with these two or variants thereof. And the last item I would probably pick up is this. Again, not the carbon answer I would recommend. They actually sell CO2 tabs, which we'll talk about probably in next week's video when we talk about oxygen and CO2 in the aquarium. But this is a other option, and it's very good for algicide. So if you do start seeing algae problems, having this on hand is going to help a lot with dealing with that, unless it's blue-green algae, which is cyanobacteria, and that's it. Basically, there's a medicine that will help with that. But this should be, these three items, I think, would be the trio. And if you look on Aquarium Co-op's website, again, free plug, they have basically this trio. Well, I think they actually throw iron in there, which I would swap out for root tabs. But root tabs, Easy Green, and then they also have an Easy Carbon, which is like the same thing as Flourish Excel, just a little bit easier because it's 1 pump per 10 gallons again. So they made it super easy for the beginner aquarist, which is great. So that is all the stuff for basically an easy to medium care, or if you're scaling up and you want to start going individual and ranking, moving yourself up towards pro mode or hardcore mode, then start getting some of these individual bottles. Obviously, the individual bottles make it very expensive. Probably to get all of Flourish's line would probably be $70 for all of it. It might last you a little while, but it depends on how many tanks you're doing. That's another thing to consider. If you have a lot of tanks, and they're all high tech, then you definitely are going to want the EI method. If you got a couple tanks, but you really want to go high tech, I would say a Flourish line is good for you because it'll last you a while. You could also go EI dosing, but it might scare some people, and it is a lot. So, plan on having and how what type of plants you plan on keeping to know what the best fertilizer option is for you. All right, now we're going to move on to the last one, and that is EI method. So I have recently been doing this. This is my second month doing the EI dosing method. This is a method basically created by Tom Barr. You can find plenty of other articles and YouTubers out there that can describe it a little bit more in depth. Basically, it says you're overdosing your nutrients and then doing a 50% water change at the end of the week to refresh all of those nutrients and start from scratch. So, what I have found in my 2 months of examining this product, which is Nylock G's DIY Mix EI dosing. So this is basically an all-in-one EI dosing. Now, normally they are sold entirely separate cans so that you're mixing the ingredients yourself. That is not a method I am at yet. I hope to be there one day, but this was kind of my dipping the toe in the water with estimated index before I went whole hog and probably spent $200 on all the little containers. So far, this has been working pretty well on one tank. I started out on the Tree of Life and on the Road Less Traveled. If you don't know what those tanks are, you can look at my June fish room tour that goes through all of our tanks right now and see the one that I am referring to, or the two that I am referring to. Now, the first month of Tree of Life did not go well. I started getting blackbeard algae. I was getting algae all over the glass. And I quickly realized my mistake. I didn't even finish out that month because I realized that the EI method, again, is very good for lots of water feeding plants and especially stem plants. It's almost a necessity, if you ask me. And I say that because you can have a lot of low care plants, Bucephalandra and Java fern and Java moss, but they don't really accept all those nutrients as quickly or are going to grow any much faster. So in a lot of those cases, I actually think an all-in-one for those is best because they seem to not develop algae on them and do much better. So they are definitely more suited for a low-care tank. So even if you have a lot of those, I don't think this method is very good unless you're doing a lot of water changes or like you have an RO unit, something like that. But if you have a Dutch scape or a lot of stem plants that you're working with, and you also have highlighting and CO2, those are the old, like you have to have CO2 to run an EI method. I can't emphasize that enough that it is a must to have CO2 or else you will have a disaster on your hands. But if you have stem plants, CO2, and decent lighting, medium to high, this, I believe, is a good option. And I say that because the Road Less Traveled has been running with that for 2 months now, and the algae amount is pretty limited. I did have to clean it off last month, but that had also been from months of not cleaning the glass off. And I see very minimal algae, almost no algae on the plants. My lower leaves on my stem plants are still alive despite most of the upper leaves smothering them out. Everything in that tank, I can say, is working fairly well. I do have a few root feeders that I will be adding some root tabs for, but I get my Bucephalandra to flower sometimes twice at the same time. So my stems are looking great. It is a very good option if you're running stem plants in CO2 and medium to high light. Again, those are the conditions you need to run something like this. Now, you may want to go whole hog and do the individual containers. It's expensive, but you would probably be able to dial it in a lot better. That's honestly the best way you can dial in a tank is using every individual macro and micronutrient to basically control exactly what you're putting in the water. Of course, that would only be if you're running RO water. If you have tap water, you're going to have to, compensate for the deficiencies in your tap water, but that can still easily be done with some work and practice and analyzing it. Now, I like this method a lot. Let me show you. It came with containers like this, and basically you just squeeze it and it squirts it up into the top there, and then you pull with a syringe, also a lifeblood for fertilizers, and it basically says 5 milliliters per 20 gallons, which makes it very simple again, which I appreciate. It also has the element breakdown. Now, these are broken into macros and micros. You do macros one day, micros the next, and you keep repeating that until the 7th day when you do a water change. That is 50%. So, I like this as a good dip your toe in the water. I think this cost me like $30 or something for the containers, and the solution for 3 sets of macro and micronutrients. So if you want to try an EI method, I do think you have to, 1, stem plants are a must. 2, CO2 is a must. 3, medium to high light is a must. 4, you have to be willing to do 40% water changes. 5, you basically have to be there every single day to do the dosing personally, which some people cannot do. But if you can make sure that you're at home or you are a homebody, then this method could work for you. But those are about the 5 conditions I would say that are necessary. Now I have a decent amount of stem plants in my road less traveled tank, but I also realize that I have some easier care, more rapidly growing plants, the Pogostemon stellatus octopus, that can help pick up a lot of those deficiencies. So all in all, I think you really need to know your aquarium and what you need in that setup. That really comes down to what the fish are putting in, how much feeding. There's many layers to this, but that all comes with the aquarium hobby, and especially with planted aquariums. So if you're not a person who really wants to do a lot of research or really dig their nose into this hardcore stuff, then I would stick more for like an easy green, again, some easy root tabs in Flourish Excel, or easy carbon, some variants of that. If you meet all the criteria and you want to try the EI method, I do recommend trying this first. It's a lot cheaper. It'll last you a long time. This is my first batch, and this will probably last me easily a year, honestly. So per price point, the EI method is actually the cheapest because it may cost you $200, but it'll also last you 2-3 years, and that'll save you a lot of money compared to these guys, which you may have to get every half a year or something, maybe even less depending on how many tanks or how big they are. So that I think is about all I've got today. I know that was a lot to unpack, but I think this is a very important topic. This is one that I'm deeply passionate about. Inverts and plants are kind of my thing, more so than fish really right now. So that might change in the future, but right now I'm a big plant person. So to finish this off, I want to give you some other future or other sources that you can get information from. Bentley Pascal is a world of knowledge with planted tanks. He has some very, very, very great videos that I highly recommend you go check out about all of these things. He goes through all the all-in-ones. He goes through root tabs, and they're all much more in depth than I've done today. So if you want more information, go look at his channel. He also does all kinds of lights. He runs all kinds of planted tanks. So he is just a wealth of information. I believe he's considered a master horticulturist or botanist or whatever they call them in the fish clubs that we don't have here in Florida. But other people that you can talk or reach out to or follow. Corvus Oskin, Joel, is a great wealth of information. The guy knows a lot about plants. He's been doing it for a long, long time, and he's very good at highlighting different plants so that you can kind of see different ones, what they look like, the care for them. He really dials in on individual plants. Dustin's Fish Tanks is another popular one. You know, he sells plants out of his house, I think. I'm not entirely sure where he's selling them now, but he does sell plants online. He has a lot of great videos and information. He's a very funny character to watch, too. He's got lots of energy, which is great if you kind of get bored with just my monotone rambling, blah, 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 blah. But that's another one. H2O Plants is another good one. And, of course, Aquarium Co-op. As you've seen, I can talk in great length about a lot of their products because I order a lot of their products from them. So that is about all I have. If you guys want to see more regular content of things like these terrariums and gerariums in the back, follow me on Instagram and on Facebook at Fitman Aquatics so that you can get more regular updates on how these things are going. We actually just took some more semi-pro pictures yesterday so that we can put them online so you guys can get a really good look at each of these gerariums and terrariums. And if you're not already subscribed, I'd greatly appreciate it if you would subscribe. We're kind of winding down through our plant live stream or our aquarium live stream saga. So soon I'll be ramping up with workout live stream sagas. That will be coming here in the near future. So if you're interested in that, give us a subscribe because I can talk in great length about working out and fitness and nutrition and all of that, as it has been the other passion in my life since I was in college, so 10 years almost now. So it does play a big role in my life as well, but I know you guys don't get to see that a lot, but that will be coming, I promise. So if you are interested in seeing all of that, definitely subscribe. And of course, if you have any questions about fertilizers or anything about aquariums, please feel free to drop a comment down below, and I would be happy to get back to you to make sure that I can help improve your hobby experience and hopefully bring more people into the hobby because that is the end goal. I think this hobby has so much to offer in so many different ways, and I just want people to realize that and see, one way that it helps me, it may help you in a completely different way. And that's the amazing part about doing this is that it has so much to offer. I just can't emphasize that enough. But I'm going to finish up here because it's almost been 45 minutes, and that's a pretty long ramble. I appreciate anyone who's been sticking with me this whole time. And of course, questions, comments down below, what I can do to help you out, make it better, always appreciated. I'm done. We're out. See ya.